and conscience to take bold and just action on climate change. And we have 40 state affiliates around the country, including some very strong affiliates located in the Southeast. And I know you heard from several IPL leaders yesterday and today, so I'm very grateful that they were able to participate. And I want to start out by talking to you about how I became involved in the issue of climate change and how my understanding of this issue has grown and evolved over time to where I am today. And and I want to start out by saying, I'm not a lifelong environmentalist. I'm not someone who has spent my entire career working in the environmental community. I started out as someone who felt a calling to enter the ministry. And I went to college, graduated with a degree in religious studies. I went on to seminary and got my Master of Divinity degree. And I spent a lot of time serving local congregations in Iowa, where I lived for 26 years. And during that time, climate change was not an issue that was close to my heart in any way. The issue that I was very focused on was the issue of hunger. I saw people who were hungry around me, families that were struggling around me in my community. And that was the issue that was closest to my heart. So the congregations that I served did, lots of different kinds of hunger ministries. They participated in feeding programs through local shelters. They raised money for the food pantry and collected food for the food pantry. We did lots of local hunger ministries, and we also raised money for global hunger issues. And we were able to really connect that to social justice issues, looking at sort of what are the underlying causes of hunger and how can we assist families in getting themselves out of poverty and becoming more self-sufficient. So doing advocacy work on things like a living wage and the earned income tax credit for families. And climate change to me was an issue that I had heard about. It was sort of someone else's issue. And I thought, yeah, I'm at home recycling and composting in my garden. And, I changed my light bulbs. And so basically I've done everything that I need to do to work on this issue. And the thing that changed for me was reading an article on the geopolitics of food that connected the dots for me between the loss of harvest due to drought and wildfire that were really fueled by climate change, and looking at the resulting food shortages in places like the Middle East, the impacts on farmers, and getting a sense that if I actually wanted to address the issue of hunger, I needed to work at a more root cause level, which was climate change. So me being me, I decided I was going to, learn as much as I could. I was going to read articles, study the issue, try and understand it before I got very involved in it. And one of the things that very early on I recognized is that this is a generational justice issue. So I have two sons. They at the time were much younger than they are now. And I recognized that I needed to be able to look my sons in the eyes and tell them that I had done everything in my power to work for solutions. Like, this was really about serving them and serving the generations that come after me. And I think that is, as you heard in my bio, still very true. I'm still very motivated by my love for my sons, by my love for future generations. And this is one of the places where I think, I've really evolved in my thinking on this. At the time I was working in Iowa, I became the director of Iowa Interfaith Power and Light, where I served for 7 years. And working in Iowa, in a more conservative state, but in a state that was very, very supportive of especially wind energy, energy efficiency at the time. Um, we looked at sort of where could we make progress. So focusing on the technology, focusing on jobs, on clean energy jobs, on good paying jobs for Iowans. That was a real area of focus for me and for a lot of the organizations that I collaborated with through my work. My eyes started to be open to the deeper interconnection between the issue of climate change and racial justice and energy justice in a couple of different ways. The first is that I had the opportunity to go on 2 toxic tours in the Midwest. One was in Chicago and one was in Detroit. And I saw firsthand the burden of pollution on those communities located near these polluting industries. So these were oil refineries, they were coal-fired power plants, they were transportation hubs and incinerators. And of course, they were all primarily located in communities of color, just what we would expect. That was very, very eye-opening to me about how these issues are interconnected. The second way was seeing an energy burden map and realizing that there are households where they are spending anywhere from 10 to 20% of their annual income on energy costs. It is far above what many researchers believe fits the definition of affordable, which sort of some define as about 6% of annual gross income. So that actually comes from ACEEE, that figure of 6%. So thinking about, what are the impacts on a family that is already living close to the edge, and they have rent or a mortgage to pay, and they have medical expenses, and they have now these utility burdens, and how do they have to start making choices about what is going to get paid and what isn't. And of course, this is very connected to the utility shutoff moratorium that we've heard and talked a little bit about during this conference as well. So looking at the impact now of COVID and utility burden and healthcare costs and so on, how are the marginalized, those who are most vulnerable, being made even more vulnerable during this time. So those things were very transformational for me in my understanding of energy justice. And, this year, in 2020, we've really deepened our understanding as a society around the intersection of health, environment, and racial justice through these intersected crises of COVID, of climate change, and all of the climate disasters that we've been seeing so far in 2020. And of course, systemic racism that was really brought to the forefront once again through the murder of George Floyd and others. And, looking at, of course, what is not just the problem, right? But what is the opportunity? I've said in other settings that we're in this Kairos moment as people of faith, using some faith language, a Kairos moment that's sometimes referred to as God's time. So what do we have the opportunity to do different in this time? How can we not go back to business as usual, which wasn't working for so many people? It just wasn't working. And so, we have a chance to create a different path forward right now, not go back to existing inequalities, but actually find new paths forward. And it's been really interesting to me to like see the parallels, because sometimes I feel like you would think that we'd all planned our conversations together, which we didn't. But yesterday, Rev lifted up Micah 6:8 in his time in reflection yesterday, and today Reverend Juan Smith lifted it up again, and it was just echoing something that was going on in my mind as well. And it's such an important scripture reference to me. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice and love kindness and walk humbly with your God? So, I think about our theme for today, which is action. It's about action. What are we doing in this time? And these are active words. Do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly. Doing and loving and walking. This is about action. It's not about sitting and thinking about it. It is about acting. And as William Barber has said, it's not about the waking, it's about the rising. You can be awake, but you can still be in bed. And so we have to get out of bed and get to work. And that means standing in solidarity with one another and acting from our deepest values, our spiritual values, including justice and love for our neighbors and the earth. So I want to share a little highlight with you, and maybe some of you have already seen this. I know there's been some media that has gotten out there already, but IPL, we released a new poll yesterday that was done in collaboration with several organizations, but IPL and Climate Nexus were part of the organizations. And this was specifically around people of faith and their attitudes towards climate change. And it was very, very interesting to me to see that this poll, some of the top lines from the poll said that 7 in 10, or 72% of voters, support increasing federal funding to protect vulnerable communities from the impacts of extreme weather as part of the COVID-19 recovery. Again, 72% of voters support increasing federal funding to protect vulnerable communities from the impacts of extreme weather as part of the COVID-19 recovery. 73% of voters say that they are worried about climate change, including 87% of Black Protestants, 82% of non-white Catholics, 77% of white Catholics, 76% of Jews, 57% of white evangelical Protestants. It's, again, 57% of white evangelical Protestants, an audience that we often don't think really cares about this issue at all. Voters are generally supportive of policies and candidates that address climate change. Majority of voters across faith groups say a comprehensive bill addressing climate change is an important priority for Congress and the president in 2021. So almost 2/3, 64% of voters want a multi-trillion-dollar federal economic stimulus to invest in clean energy infrastructure as part of the COVID-19 recovery. I think these results are astonishing. I'm actually, as someone who's very supportive of these things, I'm actually surprised that the polling is consistent with, what some of us probably in this gathering believe and think. So 81% of voters, of those polled, say that fulfilling their responsibility to protect God's creation is an important reason to address climate change, including strong majorities of Jews, Black Protestants at 94%, and white evangelical Protestants at 90%. So protecting God's creation is an important reason to address climate change. So our message matters. Like the work that we're doing in faith communities, it matters. And so the question to me then becomes like, so what, right? Like, what do we do with it? Like, what happens now? And I want to speak to this moment in time, the moment in time that we are in right now. And that is that elections matter. Elections are an opportunity for us to work towards our vision of the country that we want and the world that we want. And of course, presidential elections, it's all over the news. We had a debate last night. We know the presidential election is very important. Of course, it's important. But it also matters who is in Congress, who's representing you. It matters who the governor of your state is or who your state legislators are. It matters who is on your city council. It matters who is on your public utility council. You know, sometimes those are elected positions, sometimes they're appointed positions, but it matters who fills those seats, because the local level is critical for energy democracy and for energy justice. The local level is critical. So I want to just give you a couple of things. I'm going to drop this into the chat here, hopefully, and say, we want you to pledge to be a faith climate justice voter. So there is a link in here for you to jump on, and you can pledge to become a faith climate justice voter through Interfaith Power and Light. And you can share that information and those resources with friends. So here's what I want to encourage you to do with my call to action. Number one, pledge to become a faith climate justice voter. Number two, make a plan to vote. I know some of you have already voted, and that's fantastic. Thank you for doing that. And some of you have an intention to vote. So make your plan. Are you going to vote in person? How are you going to do that? Are you going to send in mail in your ballot? Has it come yet? Are you tracking it? How are you going to do that? Are you going to vote early? Where and when are you going to do that? Go online and check and make sure that your information is up to date with your election board. These resources are all available to you. And Susanna just let me know that I did not properly send that link. So I am going to do that now. I see I did not hit all panelists and attendees, but we'll do so. Here we go. And then the other thing we're asking you to do is to encourage at least 3 friends or family members to vote. Make sure that you're inviting them. Can they go with you? Can you sit down at the table together and fill out your ballots and take them and mail them together? Whatever that looks like for you. I'm super excited that 2 out of my 3 have already voted. So I'm very excited that is happening. And you know, I think the big thing for us to remember right now, and the big thing that polling data shows to me, is that we are powerful. We are powerful. People of faith are powerful. So let's get out there and do justice together. Thank you.
Rev, you're going to have to make me the host again.
Oh, okay. Let's see here. This is also complicated.
if you would, just go to participants.
Yeah, I got it. I got it.
Okay, cool.
Here you go.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Real quick, I got a couple of questions for you. As faith leaders and communities of faith who are on this call in particular, how do they get involved with Interfaith Power and Light?
Thanks for asking that. And that's a great question. There are a couple of ways. And so, one is you can simply go to interfaithpowerandlight.org and you can sign up to be on our list. You can find lots and lots of resources there, including, as I said, our voter campaign information, information about our Cool Congregations program and how to lower your energy use in your place of worship. You can, once you get on our list, you can be on there for action alerts and take action on lots of different kinds of policy priorities that we're focused on. So that's one way. The other way that I also really want to emphasize is to get involved in your state affiliate. So there is a map on the website that will get you to the information for your state affiliate. And I always want to encourage people to sign up with their state affiliate, because working on the ground in community with other people really is where we build power. And, there's a lot of opportunities for people to get involved, whether it's, the work that you're doing, Rev, with the PUC, and talking about energy justice at the local level with your utility commissions, or whether that's legislation that's happening at the state level to advance solar or energy efficiency or transportation justice. Whatever those campaigns are often very locally centered. And we want people to feel like they're in a community, because I think for a long time, the perception was like, I'm just one person in my congregation and I'm the only person here who cares about this. And I just feel sort of alone, right? I feel very isolated on working on this issue. That's not a good feeling. And we want people to feel empowered, not powerless, right? We want them to feel empowered, and you feel empowered when you are working with and alongside and in solidarity with others.
Thank you for that answer. Last question. This is always the typical question, but because you are the last person in this summit to speak, I'll ask this typical question, and hopefully you can bring us out with some joy. What is giving you hope right now?
Oh my goodness. Gosh, it's really, there's a combination of things I would say that are giving me hope. I mean, one is hearing and seeing and feeling the presence of young people who are leading us, right? They're it's not just sort of like, oh, they're the next generation of leaders. Like, no, they are the leaders now. They are stepping up, they are taking ownership, and they are holding us to account, right? They're saying, you all and your generations have caused this mess, and you need to clean it up. You have to take ownership and clean it up. And just seeing that, abundance of youth leadership has been incredibly inspiring to me. One of the other things, which sounds really maybe a little strange right now, but it's something that I referred to, as I was talking, is that the intersectionality of issues is really coming to the forefront now in ways that I think it hasn't before. I feel like we've spent a lot of time liking our issues in silos, but the reality is they don't exist in silos. And so, in order to really solve a wicked problem, we have to look at systemic solutions, system-wide solutions. So the fact that we're acknowledging that health and pollution and climate and systemic racism are interconnected deeply interconnected with each other gives us an opportunity to solve them together. And I have heard you say, Rev, that racial justice is climate justice and climate justice is racial justice. I firmly believe that that is true. And we cannot solve the climate crisis without also solving the racial justice crisis in this country. So I'm hopeful that we have a different opening here to create systemic solutions that are just for everyone. And, COVID is certainly not the way I would have chosen to have this conversation, right? Like I don't think any of us wanted, a pandemic in order to, to bring this to a head and actually address the real underlying issues. But it has created an opportunity that I think wasn't there before. And that gives me hope that we can break out of our silos and actually work together with one another to build a better, this vision for a better world for everyone.
Yeah, I thank you for acknowledging that racial justice is climate justice, and climate justice is racial justice. You can't have one without the other. The reason why we're in this mess that we're in is because it's been so inequitable, and inequality has long ruled. It was designed to be that way, and it hadn't changed. So in order for us to work outside of where we are, we've got to address outside of silos justice, as was said by Queen Quet today, justice. We've just got to address justice, and we've got to call for justice. Last question for you. Any last word for us before we get ready to get out of here?
Oh my goodness, just so much gratitude for these 2 days. They have been so uplifting to me. Hearing the diversity of voices that were represented, the voices of people who are doing the work on the ground and building community and building beloved community, right? This is the kind of energy that I think we need in this movement, right? Not to not to put too fine a point on the energy part, but really just it's as Reverend Dr. Durley said, this is hard work. And we've been doing it for a long time. And sometimes it feels like we're just pushing the rock uphill day after day, right? And we get caught, I think, in the in the anxiety and the feelings of doom and gloom that keep getting presented to us by various reports and polls and everything else. But yet, I feel like these kinds of gatherings, which like it would be fabulous if we were all in person, but these kinds of gatherings, they really bring the hope back to us, and they help us to see the opportunities that exist when we really do come together. We build collaboration and relationships and mutual respect and regard, and we honor one another's work. And so I just want to thank you again, and I want to thank everyone who's been involved in bringing this together, and just so many inspiring people who have spoken. I'm taking way more away from it than what I gave.
No, thank you. Listen, Reverend Dr. Gerald Durley told me when I first got into this movement, and actually what called me to this movement, I heard him in a seminar, and he said this to me. He said, "How can I preach to them from the pulpit, shout them in my pews, but they can't breathe in public?" that called me in that moment. It actually quickened me in that moment and woke me up to understanding that the gospel, my religious practices, my preaching, teaching, pastoring had to be centered in the everyday life of people and planet. And that right there was a call to get me on, to arm me and alarm me that I've got to do more in ministry than just bring people into the four walls and send them home. I had to be involved in what happens to them in their daily life and what happens to them in community. And I think that's the part that we've got to get today. And that's the reason why we had Energize in the South for energy justice, is so that we can understand that these situations and these issues are beyond our four walls and our various faith institutions or houses of worship. But we need to have ministry follow people home. And we need to be involved in their daily lives and how they live. I think Reverend Dallas Conyers hit on that today. And that's when we get into real ministry. And that is what it's like to cultivate life and have regenerative relationships. And I believe that's what we're called to do. We're called to cultivate life and to have regenerative relationships and to usher regenerative relationships.